Now, I spoke with one veteran of the Afghanistan war about some of these revelations. Lindsay Rodman is in the Marine Corps Reserves and spent 8 years on active duty for the Marine Corps. I asked her for her reaction now that she's read through some of these findings.
I feel like most of my veteran friends who I've talked to and other folks in the community, we're all like, yeah, no kidding. And we don't usually use the word kidding when we're talking about this. We say something else to each other because we were there and we saw the sort of questionable nature of the broader conflict. And I think it's really important to distinguish that from the important inroads that people were making on a daily basis for the lives of the Afghan people. For example, when I was in Afghanistan, one of my closest friends was another officer who ran a women's health clinic in Afghanistan. Her job was to educate Afghan women about health and about caring for themselves and their children. She made a really important impact every day on their lives, and that is enduring, even if the broader political goals of the war in Afghanistan were not accomplished. So I think it's really important to distinguish the really important tactical missions that people were performing every day honorably and successfully from the sort of broader political quagmire that we were in there.
I want to go back to the Afghanistan Papers for a moment. When you were reading it, did that change your opinion on your deployment at all?
No. And like I said, because from veterans' perspective, we're like, yeah, no kidding. The one story that I tell about this was, I was a Marine Corps officer. I was a judge advocate. Most of the work that I did was in the Combat Operations Center for 1st Marine Division. So that's all the ground forces who are in Helmand Province. And one day I had a sergeant and a corporal come up to me and they said, we've had this question for a long time and we thought you could answer it. I said, okay, who's the enemy? And I was like, well, that is a fantastic question. It is alarming that you're asking me that question since we have been deployed to Afghanistan fighting the enemy for months now. But it's also not an easy question to answer. And we had a long conversation about the Taliban and about counterinsurgency.
With the tens of thousands of people that have died in this conflict and then the publication of this papers, was this all for naught? Was this all for naught, or is there something else that we should understand as the American public when it comes to this conflict?
I think it's the wrong question to be asking. I mean, we asked our membership too because people want us to answer it. It's the question that everyone asks. And so we said, is the conflict in Afghanistan worth it? And veterans of the conflict, even now where I think the Afghanistan conflict historically has gotten a lot stronger support than the conflict in Iraq. Even now it's starting to wane a little bit, but we do have a majority of our membership saying that it's still worth it, or at least the plurality, the strongest contingent that answers that question. But the real question is not whether it's worth it, but what are we going to do now? And are we taking care of the people that we sent there? If we can't answer those two questions, then why are we talking about whether it was worth it or not? That just seems sort of like an academic debate that we can talk about later. We have things that need to be accomplished today. We need to figure out what we're doing in Afghanistan. And from our perspective, as Iraq and Afghanistan veterans of America, we need to be taking care of the people that we sent there. And the fact that there's so much work to be done on both of those fronts, we're sort of tabling the let's debate whether history was worth it thing later.
To be clear, Lindsay is saying, in her opinion, that a lot of the findings in these Afghanistan papers, there were some serious oversights and missteps from the top officials, but she says when it comes to these very simple questions, they take complex answers, and this is really a nuanced situation from her perspective. Jay?
Of course. Austin, has there been any reaction in Congress to the release of the Afghanistan papers?
Some lawmakers are calling for accountability in response to the Washington Post's report. Democratic Senator and former presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand sits on the Senate Armed Forces Committee. She wants hearings to investigate the strategy in Afghanistan. In fact, she posted this on Twitter. We should keep talking about this in open hearings. We owe it to the American people and to our service members to have a real plan to end this war. That's why I've called for additional Senate hearings on our strategy in Afghanistan. But at this point, Jay, there does not appear to be any new hearing scheduled to discuss this very topic.